modern spirituality, popular spirituality, is very much presents itself and is perceived as being a very right brain dominated tradition where there's a lot of intuition, a lot of heart, feeling, creativity, and expression. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the other side of spirituality, which is the more logical, rational, and philosophical aspects. And we're going to talk a little bit about how both of these sides are meant to support each other, not really meant to be practiced individually. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. The image of spirituality today, if you look online, if you watch videos, if you see advertisements for different events happening under different teachers, we have this image being presented of sitting on the beach, meditating, watching the sunrise, a group of people dancing together, a group of people singing, a group of people meditating or crying and laughing, a room full of people sitting quietly as their master sits up on a throne or a dais of some sort in beautiful robes while everyone sits and meditates together. And there's a sense of peace and calm and livingness and life itself, of laughter and joy and celebration that is very much part of at least the marketing, the way that spirituality is portrayed. But it goes much more than that. It's actually one of the beautiful things that spirituality can offer the modern person in today's world is a return back to a simpler way of life, a return back to livingness, to what it is to really be human. And a lot of our lifestyle today has deprived us of some aspects of our own basic humanity. So understand in this video, I don't have any criticisms of that. I think that's a really beautiful thing. Our society has become very cerebral. And in a lot of ways, I think that this additional push towards a more intuitive way of life and life as love and compassion and being connected with your heart that a lot of spirituality offers to people and portrays itself as offering, I think is simply a response to how cerebral much of life has become. So I don't criticize that at all because I think it can be very helpful for people. However, what I'm concerned with is what happens when someone is trying to better themselves and they do this and they get more connected with themselves, more connected with their humanity. They're laughing more, they're crying more, they're dancing more, they're singing more, and that aspect of modern spirituality has helped them. But what happens when that person suddenly begins to have true strong desires to achieve realization? What if they want to explore deeper aspects of the spiritual path than just therapy, than just getting in touch again with their inner child, than just being in touch again with their intuition? What if they want to go deeper into it than that? And my concern is that much of what popular spirituality has arranged itself around is not actually the goal of spirituality, which is realization and spiritual liberation, but instead about, returning to some of these aspects of our human nature that we're much in need of right now. And I understand that when people are thirsty, you need to give them water. But there's more to life than being thirsty and drinking water. There's more to the spiritual path than just being wholesome within yourself, just being in touch with your own nature, with your own natural being, and enjoying life. Well, that's a beautiful aspect of the path and one that many people today need. If somebody who's going through that in one of these spiritual circles should suddenly give rise to actual true bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a sudden overwhelming desire to achieve liberation. And from the Buddhist perspective, we say achieve liberation for the sake of all sentient beings. When this becomes a consuming desire within you, an all-consuming desire that pours out through you and begins to fill the rest of your life, many people are going to find that their spiritual traditions are inadequate. They're not properly equipped. Even if they've been following a spiritual teacher for years, they lack the tools necessary to engage fully with their path. And I think part of this is because in trying to return back and nourish one part of our nature, which we can say is perhaps a more right-brained aspect of our nature, that part that's creative, that's intuitive, that's in love, that's poetic. In an attempt to return to that, I feel that we've unduly neglected the more rational and logical aspect of ourselves, which is also equally part of our nature. The problem with a cerebral life is not actually that it's cerebral. The issue with it is that we're not thinking properly, The issue isn't thinking itself or having to think a lot. One of the big problems many people face in their life, one of the reasons why they have a hard time now connecting with their heart and listening to their intuition and laughing and crying and being open with themselves, is because they haven't thought well about life. And in not thinking well about life, they've made a lot of mistakes they didn't need to make. They've experienced suffering they didn't need to suffer. It was optional suffering. And just because they were unable to properly think about something, maybe it was something like the loss of a loved one, maybe it was the loss of career, maybe it was just a big life change, even if it was positive, like becoming a mother or father. And because the mind hasn't been trained to think well, it's just responding emotionally in a way where gradually people kind of slowly drift away inside. They begin to die inside. They don't let their emotions out. They're stressed out. They're anxious and they feel stuck. And so they can't be free. So while this emotional aspect of our spiritual cultivation and development and learning to be more in tune with ourselves again and with our heart is definitely an important, beautiful thing that spirituality can offer us, there's a whole other dimension to spirituality that, again, is incredibly human. All the spirituality is about being the best human you can be. And one of the things that makes a human is that they're a rational animal. They are a thinking, intelligent creature. They are capable of incredible feats of intellect. And classically, spirituality has always had deep roots in intellectual traditions, in philosophy, in grammar, in logic, mathematics. And many of the greats from the various spiritual traditions, they established the foundations of those traditions rigorously with logic, because it's not enough to just try to memorize some teachings about the way the world is. What you have to do is you have to try to see it yourself. You have to see it with your own eyes. And this is why wisdom, in particular, when I say wisdom in this video, I'm going to be referring to Pragma, which is analytical wisdom. It's penetrating insight, the ability to discern the truth from the unreal, the ability to discern different states of ontological being, the ability to reflect meaningfully and deeply on your own life experiences and meditative experiences. This is half the spiritual path in every tradition, just about, is Pragma. In some traditions, Pragma is the main pillar of the entire path. But even in the ones where there's a lot more heart and a lot more intuition, Pragma, discriminating intellect, the ability to analyze yourself and deduce important teachings from what you see within yourself, within your practices, within the world around you, so that you make good life decisions, you make good practice decisions, you follow a teacher that's actually a decent teacher that stands up to a basic logical examination and test. You're following a tradition that makes sense. And then gradually, through logic and philosophy, you can gain an incredible degree of certainty in your tradition and in your path. And that certainty is something, when you arrive at it on your own, it has far more power than just when you memorize something another teacher told you. If you arrive at these truths, even if you've heard someone else say them, when you finally see them for yourself, when you ask some important questions about life and about the path and about the body, and begin to arrive at some of these deductions yourself, you'll be amazed how much your spiritual path begins to benefit, how deeper your meditations become. So my concern isn't that the more right-brained approach to spirituality is causing problems. I think it's a much-needed medicine for this time and for people nowadays. My concern is that it's not the whole picture. It's half, and in some traditions less than half, of really the spiritual teachings, or what we call the spiritual path. And I worry that people who pursue such a one-sided approach to spirituality are going to be missing a lot of the basic foundation that spirituality arises from, and lacking much of the understanding as to what the purpose of spirituality is and why you should engage in it, what happens in meditation, and so on. So this is an important aspect that I feel needs to be addressed. So what is analytical wisdom, and how do we cultivate it? Usually, like Tsongkhapa in his Lamrim Chimo, The Stages of the Path, talks a bit about three different kinds of analytical wisdom, some of which just deals with basic logic and grammar, and some which deals with more transcendental experiences. And what we're primarily concerned with here in this video is the importance of it in transcendental experience. And so what Pragma means in this regards is your ability to have an intense spiritual experience, right? What we could call transcendental or somewhat ineffable. It's beyond your normal ability to cognize. It's beyond your normal activities of sense experience and imagination. In other words, you had your mind blown somehow. You had deep practice, deep meditation. Something happened you didn't expect. You reached a new stratum of the mind, or you experienced reality in a different way. Now, how do you take that experience, which happened within space and time, in the sense that it happened at a certain place and at a certain time in your life? How do you take that experience, reflect on it, get meaning out of it? How do you extract meaning out of the experience that you had, instead of just allowing the experience to be meaningful to you? How do you extract the meaning out of that experience and now relate the implications of that experience to the rest of your life, to how you live every day, to how you think, instead of just allowing the experience to live on an island? In other words, how do you get wiser, right? How do you gain wisdom from an experience that you had that was beyond normal cognition, beyond your normal ability to think about it? Yet when you return from the experience, when the experience ends, how do you understand what just happened to you? And how do you gain meaning out of this in a way that has meaning for the rest of your life, so that your spiritual experiences don't just become stuck on a little island called meditation, where they never leave that place. They don't affect the rest of your life. They don't affect the rest of your world. So this is what where analytical wisdom really comes into play, where it has a big role. Is we have an experience. Say, for example, something fairly common or simple happens, where for the first time in your life you're meditating, and you suddenly find yourself out of your body. You suddenly find yourself just floating in a space a few feet above your head. And usually when that happens first time, it kind of, it's such an intense experience that jolts you back into your body. But let's say this happens to you. Now, if you don't have proper insight, if you lack the ability to inquire into the nature of things and to extract meaning out of your spiritual experience, you might just think, oh, that was a neat experience, and leave it at that. Maybe tell people about it, maybe be quite fascinated, maybe be excited about it, want to return to it later. And that's all good and well. But that reduces the value of the experience, because now an experience that could have been very helpful for you is unable to be helpful for you due to your own lack of understanding, your own lack of inquiry, and the ability to inquire, right? That it's not a lot of people anymore actually have the ability to inquire deeply into something and try to understand what something meant. But if you suddenly find yourself outside your body, what does that mean about the brain? What does that mean about physical incarnation? And what are the implications of that for physical life, for your way of life? If you experience yourself out of your body, what are the implications for that, for all your priorities that you had in life before you had that experience? If you don't learn how to reflect properly and apply the meaning of your spiritual experiences to the rest of your life by extracting meaning from it with analytical wisdom, then an experience that could have been very transformative for the whole of your life just becomes inert. It becomes unable to do anything beyond just wow you and astonish you. And the spiritual path isn't about that. Spiritual path is meant to constantly cause changes of consciousness, changes in how we actually perceive the world. And those changes of consciousness, by and large, according to all the traditions, only happen through discernment, through analytical wisdom, through insight and inquiry. And your ability to understand what has happened to you, to give it a place in your normal world, and to allow that experience to change your mind, to actually change the nature of your consciousness, your vasanas, your thought habits. That only happens by constantly reflecting on the nature of the experience. You may have had that experience one time, but that experience now needs to be reflected on 1,000 times in different ways and attacked from different angles, so you can understand it from every possible perspective, because only in doing that can you give it a place in your life. And once you've given it a place in your life, once you've given the meaning of that experience a place in your life, then the spiritual path begins to transform all of your life. Say you go into a deep state of samadhi. Well, in samadhi, unlike if you're out of the body where there's still an experience of space and time, in samadhi, depending on how deep you go, there's no experience of time. You feel like you just blinked your eyes and 3 hours passed. But it's not the same as when you go to sleep at night, because there's a lot of bliss, a lot of ecstasy, Yet time seems to be distorted or dilated in some kind of way when you go into samadhi. So again, now you need to start asking questions about, well, what is time? How is it conceivably possible that one could experience time in a different way, and even in a somewhat non-linear way or in a dilated way, as opposed to the way we normally experience it in meditation, and it not be the result of sleep? Because you'll find, for example, in samadhi, you're aware of what's going on around you, but your experience of time is somehow different. The quality of time has changed. And we could go on. Many different kinds of spiritual experiences are going to happen this way. And prajna goes even beyond just your spiritual practices. One of the biggest uses of prajna, of analytical wisdom, is trying to troubleshoot for yourself why you stopped making progress. There's going to be many times in your life where you hit a wall in your meditations, and the answer to how you get over that wall is not just more meditation. The answer is usually that you're stuck in a particular view. You're stuck in a particular thought process or approach or motivation that is no longer going to get you any further on the path. You've exhausted its ability to help you progress. And if you lack the self-awareness and the insight into yourself and into your mind, and you lack just the training and education in your own system, you haven't read the scriptures, you haven't read the philosophic treatises, you don't understand the inherent logic of how your spiritual system actually works, then you have no tools at your disposal to overcome that wall. And I've seen this many times where spiritual practitioners, they hit a wall in their practice and they just stay there at that wall for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They never effectively get over this hurdle and move to the next states of their development, because they were stuck in their mind. Their mind was stuck in one way of thinking. And that way of thinking may have been useful at the beginning of their path, but due to an inability to actually question themselves, question their beliefs, question their opinions about themselves, the path, meditation, practice, due to a lack of understanding of the teachings of their tradition, the logic of their tradition in terms of the internal logic, the internal structure of every spiritual tradition, which is often a little bit different as far as how they understand the spiritual process happening. And if you're partaking in a particular path, whether it be Buddhism or Sufism or Taoism, it doesn't matter. You have to understand the inner logic of the path that you're using so that you can troubleshoot these obstacles you're going to hit in your path. So this is, in my mind, one of the biggest benefits of prajna, is this ability to adequately investigate not just the nature of reality, but that's actually further on. That's the highest level of prajna, is investigating adequately the nature of reality in such a way where you come to conclusions that put you into altered states, which is a beautiful thing about philosophic contemplation, is that philosophic contemplation, which is really what we can call meditative prajna, philosophic contemplation can actually gradually guide you into altered states. It can lead you into kinds of meditation on its own. You can arrive at a philosophic conclusion that just annihilates your mind for a moment, and you just sit there in the no-mind state of peace and joy. You can come to certain realizations and conclusions about the nature of reality that have far-reaching implications for your path, for your mundane life, for every aspect of your life. So prajna is beautiful in this regard. It's not something we should throw away. This analytical wisdom is the basis of much of the path. It helps us in the long term understand reality more clearly, because all spirituality is about our relationship with what's real. And then in the short term, it gives us the ability to actually troubleshoot our path, understand our path, and relate with our path in a way that's helpful so that we can think rationally about our spiritual development. We can actually progress in a somewhat methodic way because we know what we're doing. When prajna really fully blossoms, you're able to see for yourself with your own eyes the truths of the spiritual path for yourself, not just memorizing what the Buddha said or Lao Tzu said or someone else. You get to see for yourself the reality of what they experience. You get to understand why someone might say something as seemingly asinine and inaccurate as, this world is not real, this world is an illusion, or the five senses are not veridical. Why would someone say that? Have they gone insane? You need to be able to investigate that accurately, because that's what all the great mystics are saying, is that apparent reality is a little off. If Nagarjuna says, even if you investigate it logically, the logical structure of what we think is normal in life, it doesn't hold up to logical analysis, doesn't hold up to any kind of rigorous investigation. So if we don't understand the rational basis of our path, we're going to end up hitting a lot of hiccups. We're going to end up hitting a lot of potholes in our journey where we're unable to make sufficient progress. And this is really, at the end of the day, what I'm worried about in the way that pop culture has adopted spirituality today, with what I call popular spirituality. And I have to call it that because what you're learning today in most spiritual circles, even very traditional spiritual circles, if you hang around different Tibetan teachers or Indian teachers, a lot of what's being taught, if they're traveling the world and teaching multiple cultures, they're teaching a kind of pop culture spirituality that is not the way their traditions were classically taught. They're not requiring you to go through something like Buddhist Shedra for 15 years of study in philosophy and grammar and Buddhist arts and sciences, right? They're not requiring you to do all the important analytical investigations and debates, which are very popular in a number of spiritual traditions. And so there's not a strong training of our intellect. And the issue is the way that we talk about the path is intellectual. When we talk about ignorance and knowledge, ignorance and enlightenment, that's the crux of the entire spiritual problem there, is that we're ignorant of the nature of reality. An enlightened being is someone who is enlightened as to the nature of reality and themselves. And these are intellectual terms. If we try to discard the intellect, if we remove the intellect from our spiritual path, we're going to find eventually we don't have much of a path, because the intellectual teachings that accompany a path are the road that you walk on. That's the map that you're following. And if you get rid of that, you're going to end up getting lost in the wilderness of a bunch of different spiritual practices. You're just going to pick up initiations from this person and that person and this tradition and that tradition, and you're just going to follow your heart. And unfortunately, while the heart is very much the energy of the path, the liveliness of the path, philosophy is the eyes of the path. And if you remove philosophy from the path, if you remove analytical wisdom from the path, you've removed your eyes also. And even though you have a lot of heart and feeling, you're just walking around blind, and you're never going to be able to reach the summit of the path. And in the end, you're going to end up leave the path feeling very let down and lied to, because the whole picture of the path wasn't presented to you. And because of that, that's not really actually on you. That's more, many of the popular spiritual teachers today, that's their fault for not presenting the path in a holistic way. Because yes, in today's society, we do need to reconnect again with some aspects of our humanity, like our heart, our love, our compassion, with laughter and joy and grief and all these important things it is to be human. But reasoning is another important thing in being human. We're rational animals. We need to learn how to think well, because if we don't think well, it's not only going to affect our mundane lives, it's going to affect our spiritual life as well. So if you're serious about your path and about generally trying to have realization, I would encourage you to now go out of your way and get some books on the subject that you're interested in, get some books on the path that you're a part of. Just about every single spiritual tradition out there has a healthy dose of philosophy accompanying it. Pick up some Adi Shankaracharya, or pick up one of the many Buddhist philosophical treatises. Read some Plato. Learn to get your mind to think a little bit more critically about your path, and about your own practices, and about yourself and your beliefs, your own conditioning. And you'll find that you're able to make rapid progress on the path, because the beautiful thing about analytical wisdom, the beautiful thing about the entire philosophic process, is it doesn't require a meditation seat. It doesn't require sitting down at your altar. You can keep it going all day long. You can keep the philosophic process in some kind of movement, some kind of contemplative activity throughout your entire day. And it's a beautiful way to fill your day with something that benefits your path spiritually. So I hope that you've enjoyed the video today. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Keep up to date with all of our content. Thank you.